all of that lends itself to, Pennsylvania being really, I think, the keystone to unlocking 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, in terms of how you win, there are a couple of cross-cutting pressures going on, not just in Pennsylvania, but nationally. So if you go back 30, 35 years ago, presidential election 1988, the Pennsylvania map looked almost entirely different from how it looks today in two respects. Number one, in southwestern Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, very blue-collar, largely white area. Used to be very union, still has some union presence. Mike Dukakis, the 1988 Democratic presidential candidate, who lost nationwide and narrowly lost Pennsylvania as well, he carried every single one of those counties. Every single one of those Pennsylvania counties that borders West Virginia, and he carried West Virginia. You go across 300 miles to the eastern part of the state, the area where I'm from. I'm from Philadelphia, but if you look just outside Philadelphia, every single one of those suburban counties was largely Republican. In fact, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, which demographically is very similar, ironically, to Montgomery County, Maryland, very affluent, high college-educated population, high socioeconomics, that was 2-to-1 Republican back 30, 35 years ago. What has happened is over the last 15, 20 years, and especially since Trump has been president, both have moved in opposite directions. Democrats are doing better than ever, including this past 2024 election in which we lost statewide. The numbers out of suburban Philadelphia, better than ever. But in southwestern PA, as well as other blue-collar counties in Pennsylvania, Republicans had their best election ever. So the candidate who will be able to win in Pennsylvania is someone who will be able to continue that growth in college-educated areas, as well as doing a little bit better in terms of turnout and margins among working-class, non-white populations in places like Philadelphia, especially heavily Hispanic wards. But at the same time, get the kind of numbers that Biden was able to get in 2020 in those non-college educated, blue-collar counties that aren't in Philadelphia or suburban Philadelphia. That is absolutely the key to victory in Pennsylvania, whether it's for the presidential race or any other statewide race.
Do you think Scranton Joe could have won?
That's a different question. First, he did win in 2020. He won by 1.2%. He did exactly what I just talked about. Impressive numbers for a Democrat in suburban, college-educated areas, much more so than anyone expected. And he was able to make those marginal improvements in places like Erie County and Northampton County and other kind of blue-collar pockets where Hillary Clinton in 2016 had really badly underperformed. I mean, the question of would he have won in 2024, I mean, it's an interesting historic, game. But frankly, for someone who wants to win in 2026 and 2028, I can't stand any wasted effort wondering about what would have happened in 2024. Frankly, it's as relevant to me as someone asking, geez, if Lyndon Johnson had done a bombing freeze a few weeks earlier, would Hubert Humphrey have won in 1968? They're both equally irrelevant to whether or not we... No, they are irrelevant to whether we win in 26 and beyond.
No, because if you model a candidate that was like Joe Biden...
that's a different question.
So if he could have won, I mean, what we're basically saying is that a white working man who came from that state, working class vibes, if you get someone like that to run on the Democratic ticket, do you think you could have won rather than having...
To be clear, I don't think the person necessarily has to have my same skin color in order to do well in those areas. Case in point, Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, I mean, did so much better than any Democrat since him in the kind of areas that I just talked about, Erie County, Northampton County, et cetera. So, people are interesting. I mean, think about this. 11% of Pennsylvania voters voted for Barack Obama twice and then voted for Donald Trump at least once. Trying to understand that, I mean, that's part of what makes politics interesting, fun, and also sometimes maddening, trying to figure out what's going on there. So we always try to look on paper, just like sports. We try to look at who's going to win on paper. But the game isn't played on paper. It's played in real life. And there's no way to quantify or account for a candidate's charisma, authenticity, genuineness, likability. You really can't, put something into a computer or into AI and spit out the perfect candidate.
It seems like the Democratic Party tries to do that, though. Like, that's their thing, because they're trying to tick all the boxes, and then they don't end up getting a candidate that necessarily connects. That's been, not since Obama, really, if you think about it. He was like electric. He transcended parties. I was just wondering, how would you interpret Fetterman's rightward shift recently? Everywhere he goes, he's asked if he is a Republican. He co-sponsored the Laken-Riley Act. He was the lone Democrat to do it in the last, Congress. And then you actually joined this time around in this Congress and voted for the Laken-Riley Act. Should we interpret this that Pennsylvania is getting redder, and that is why you both are?
No, so first, John Fetterman is his own person, just like I'm my own person as well. I had voted not specific. So this gets into kind of the parliamentary procedure. There were two entirely different bills that were both named the Laken-Riley Act in two different terms. There was one last term called the Laken-Riley Act, named after victim of a really horrendous crime in Georgia. In that piece of legislation last year, the whole first page was a listing of what they called findings, the Republican authors of it, including accusing Joe Biden of her murder, saying it was specifically Joe Biden and his policies that resulted in her murder and losing her life. There was other sort of incendiary language that was really outrageous in that, which actually is what prompted me to vote against it. Fast forward to this year, just last month, a different bill is introduced. It has the same title. None of that was in there. It was specifically about the policy as to whether or not someone should be detained if they're here unlawfully and they committed a crime. That's always been my position. I've voted for other pieces of legislation consistent with that, not just this term, including one that also passed in the last month or so. By the way, that used to be the common sense Democratic position back when Barack Obama was president. I think our party made a mistake in moving away from that. I think that's where the country is. I'm the son of an immigrant. I know you have a proud immigrant background, your family as well, the same as mine. All four of my grandparents were born elsewhere. We can be a nation of immigrants, but also a nation of laws. And I want to make sure that if we're going to use our political capital on the Democratic side to be consistent as a nation of immigrants, we don't do so in a way that adopts a cause that is so unpopular it actually compromises our ability to fight for all of those, the vast majority of immigrants who are here for the right reasons because they want to work hard, play by the rules, provide a better life. Studies continue to show that actually, according to the numbers, those who are immigrants to this country actually commit crimes at a lower level than those who are native born. So I've never bought into, nor will I, the sort of demagoguery on this issue. But I do believe that when it comes to someone who has broken the law and committed a serious act, I think we need to be consistent and clear as a party when it comes to those.
Okay. I want to open this up to some student questions.
Just raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. Who's got a question?
Hi, my name's Abby. I have this question for Congressman Boyle. Trump and the Republicans did really good breaking into this manosphere on the podcast, on TikTok, and really targeting that young male audience on social media. The Democrats tried to do this with the influencers of the DNC, but in 2026 and 2028, how do you think the Democrats can be better at breaking into non-traditional media?
Yeah, this is by the way, a great name. It's my daughter's name. So very partial to anyone named Abby. It's a great question, and it's something that I find myself asking. It goes to what I talked about earlier about the rise of these non-traditional or non-mainstream sources of media. I will go basically on any podcast that I'm asked. I will be true to who I am. I think people can smell a phony a mile away. And so, my best advice is just be who you are and don't try to be anything that you're not. But I will say in general, if any candidate came to me asking for advice, I would say don't be so risk averse that you turn down those opportunities. You might be on podcasts where you say the wrong thing, you put it inartfully. I'm asking or answering any question you have here. God knows I probably said something that, got someone angry. So be it. I mean, look who's in the White House right now.
Yeah.
I think that we'd be wise to learn something from that. Not to adopt all of, his policies or the crazy stuff that he says, but don't be so risk averse or afraid to make a mistake.
I think it's because the Democratic Party was sort of the party of canceling, and I think there's a fear that if they say the wrong thing, they can be canceled.
I don't think it was a Democrat. I think there was a moment in our culture in 2017, 2018, where that was very popular. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I think it was much larger than just one political party. That sort of movement to immediately cast someone out from society if they had, committed some perceived sin.
But a lot of it was just using the wrong rhetoric, using the wrong words, using the wrong pronouns, it was like people were ready to go after you. And so now Democrats have to try to become more relatable again after, years of...
I've always appreciated, I think someone who has actually spoken well on this topic repeatedly was Barack Obama. He has referenced the fact that, we all have older relatives who might put something in a way that might not be entirely politically correct or the language that is used today. That doesn't mean they're necessarily bad people or they should be canceled. There are a lot of people who have a good heart and good intentions but might put things, in a different way. I very much believe we should not be about canceling them or dismissing them. And I think that sort of instinct actually turns a lot of people off.
Right. Definitely.
There we go. I'm from PA5 Delco, so happy PA is in the house. But my question is, it really seemed like Joe Biden would not push back on the left at all. It really felt like Bernie Sanders was running his economic policy. And my question is, how can Democrats, it seemed like Obama did this more, push back on the left and sort of stay moderate? Because I feel like a lot of people were turned off by some of Joe Biden's policies.
I think any time, it's funny, it's interesting you have that perception, because I have heard the same question in reverse. I have literally had progressive friends of mine say, it really seemed like Wall Street was running his policies, and why wasn't he more populist or more progressive? I've had that said to me by including, I'm thinking one particular good friend of mine is in my district. So I think some of that is the perception of the person who is asking the question and where they're coming from. But it does speak to a larger issue, and that is anytime you're in the majority, it is challenging to keep everyone within your tent rowing in the same direction and on the same side. As time goes on, we'll see how Donald Trump and his side struggles with this, especially with such a small majority in the House of Representatives. You can have a coalition, and structurally speaking, I actually think, all things being equal, the Democratic side always has a little bit of a harder time or a more difficult time because, frankly, we are a more diverse party, and I mean that in the true sense. We're more diverse ideologically, ethnically. The Republican side is more homogeneous. And so sometimes that actually makes it, now I wouldn't want to be them, but it does make it sometimes a little bit easier, whereas, we have to go the extra mile. That having been said, though, if you want to take a look back at the last 4 years, which, frankly, for 2026 and 2028, I do not want to do because I believe every election is about the future, not the past. But if you were to take a look at 2021 and 2022, you would say, wow, Joe Biden was able to get through a robust agenda that included everyone from Bernie Sanders and AOC to Joe Manchin voting yes. And there is a lot of playing ground in between that. That's pretty impressive. And not just one bill, but on a number of landmark pieces of legislation. I do think, and I continue to have confidence that Joe Biden will be well remembered in the history books far more so than his numbers may suggest today.
He just wasn't so great at selling those accomplishments, which kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier.
The stagecraft
Exactly.
is part of the job as well.
Yep. Anyone else? One more question.
Hi, my name is Mike. We've seen a lot of ridiculous suggestions from Elon Musk and other people on the right, like having elected bodies remove the worst 1% of judges. He tweeted that the other day, and having Congress impeach judges and have them arrested and put on trial for unnamed crimes. But to me, these suggestions seem ridiculous, but I thought a lot of things that people on the right were saying were ridiculous until they actually implemented them. I mean, what's the strategy in place to, push back against these, I don't even know how to describe them, other than ridiculous suggestions?
I think it would be a mistake to just laugh off these absurd things that Musk is saying. First, he's the richest person in the world by a mile. Someone told me the other day that if you take number 2 and 3 on that list, they don't equal Musk's wealth. That is extraordinary, something like close to $500 billion now. He also clearly has more power in the Trump administration than I think any other unelected person has ever had in American history. So, there was this debate for years about Trump. Oh, do you take him seriously? Do you take him literally? Is it both? I remember in November, December of 2020, when Trump kept talking about disputing the election results, saying it was a rigged election and doing something about it, I would have Republicans say to me, oh, he'll come around. Don't take that serious. Don't take that literally. Well, then we saw what happened on January 6th. So I think it would be a great mistake to dismiss out of hand what Elon Musk is saying. I think anytime the richest person in the world, this unelected person who sometimes seems like he's the one running the White House, someone with that much wealth who's in that kind of a position, we have to pay attention to what he's saying, as ridiculous as it may sound.
Yeah. He's been described as almost like a presidential spouse.
Boy, I am not going to comment on that in any way.
He did say, "I love Donald Trump as much as a man can love another man," something along those lines.
Welcome to C-SPAN After Dark.
And that's why you come here.